Ever wondered what, actually keeps those impressive bridges standing, strong and those intricate tunnels from, collapsing?
Hmm.
Well, today's deep dive, we're gonna, throw on a hard hat, you know what I mean? We're diving into the world of professional ethics,
Okay.
specifically in engineering and geoscience, especially in British Columbia. We're breaking down two really key documents. The Code of Ethics from Engineers and Geoscientists BC, right? And the Professional Governance Act itself.
Yeah.
Think of this deep dive as like a sort of like a blueprint to understanding not just, the technical know-how, but like the ethical backbone of these professions, right?
It's a fascinating area because, I think most people, when they think of engineering and geoscience, they think of complex calculations, massive projects. But it really all boils down to something surprisingly simple, you know, people.
I'm intrigued. So it's not just about making sure the math checks out, but it's about the human impact too.
Exactly. And both the code and the act, they make it crystal clear that the safety, health, and welfare of the public, that's like paramount.
Right.
Not a suggestion. It's like the bedrock of these professions.
It's easy to forget that when you're just picturing blueprints and, geological surveys and all that. Hold paramount, though. That's pretty strong language.
Yeah.
What happens if someone doesn't? Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Well, that's where the Professional Governance Act
Yeah.
kind of comes into play.
Yes.
It actually outlines the consequences for breaching the code.
Okay.
And they can range from, a slap on the wrist to, in really serious cases, losing your license to practice. So it's a stark reminder that ethical obligations, they come with very real accountabilities as well.
Wow. So the stakes are high. It's more than just a set of guidelines then. It's really about maintaining public trust and just making sure that everyone gets to go home safe at the end of the day.
Precisely. And that leads us to another crucial aspect that's outlined in the code, and that's competence.
Which seems like a no-brainer, right? You wouldn't want someone operating on your heart who just dabbled in a bit of WebMD, right?
Right.
But how does this translate to engineering and geoscience, these fields?
Imagine this. You have this massive infrastructure project underway, let's say in downtown Vancouver,
Right.
and they've brought in, someone who's watched a few YouTube tutorials on structural engineering.
Okay, that's a terrifying thought. I would not want to be anywhere near that construction site.
Exactly. And that's why the code mandates that professionals, they can only practice within their area of expertise.
Yeah, that makes...
Because it's recognizing that the stakes are simply too high to gamble with anything less than, specialized knowledge and experience.
So public safety is paramount. Competence is key. What about those kind of tricky situations where an engineer or a geoscientist might find themselves caught in a conflict of interest? Let's say if they're working on a project where a family member is involved or something like that. How do those situations work?
You've hit a critical point.
Yeah.
And the code doesn't shy away from that at all.
Okay.
In fact, it goes beyond just saying, avoid conflicts of interest.
Okay.
It stresses the importance of transparency, requiring the disclosure of even the appearance of a conflict.
Interesting. So it's not just about whether there's an actual bias that might be influencing their decisions. It's also about just maintaining that public perception and trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where, let's say, a geoscientist is tasked with assessing the environmental impact of let's say, a mining project.
Okay.
Now, let's say they also happen to have a financial stake in the company that's actually proposing this project.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how that would raise some eyebrows, even if they were completely unbiased in their assessment.
Precisely. The code recognizes that, maintaining public trust requires this commitment to transparency. It's about being above board, even if it means stepping away from a project to avoid even the perception of impropriety.
So you're saying it's not just about what you do, but it's also about how it looks to those on the outside.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that commitment to transparency, it extends to another, perhaps more complex aspect of the code, and that's whistleblowing obligations.
Ooh, okay. Now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. Tell me more about this whistleblowing idea and why it's so important, particularly in fields like engineering and geoscience. Whistleblowing, it sounds kind of like something out of a spy thriller or something.
Right.
All cloak and dagger, but it's serious business in these professions, right?
Yeah, definitely not a Hollywood movie. It's about, professional responsibility and courage.
Right.
Essentially, the code, it mandates that engineers and geoscientists, they have a duty to report colleagues or even their employers if they witness actions that they believe could endanger public safety or the environment.
Wow, even their employers. I mean, that's a big deal. That can't be easy to call out potentially like dangerous or unethical practices,
Yeah.
especially if it's like, someone who's higher up the ladder than you.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It takes a great deal of courage, and that's why the Professional Governance Act, it lays out a legal framework to actually protect whistleblowers.
Okay.
So they can't be fired, demoted, or penalized in any way for speaking up about legitimate concerns.
That makes sense. It protects the public and it protects those who are, brave enough to kind of raise the alarm. So how does this actually work in practice? Like let's say I'm an engineer, I'm working on a bridge project.
Okay.
I discover like a serious flaw in the design plans.
Okay.
What's my first step? Do I just like pick up the phone and call the EGBC? What do I do?
Well, not quite that fast. The code emphasizes, a more structured approach.
Yeah.
Usually you would first try to address the concern internally, within your organization.
Okay.
Maybe start with your supervisor or, going through established internal channels that they might have.
So it's not about just like blindsiding anyone. You want to try to like resolve it internally first. But what if, and this is what like makes me nervous thinking about it, like what if nothing changes?
Yeah.
What if my concerns are dismissed? Like then what happens?
Well, that's where those legal protections that we were just talking about, that's where they really kind of kick in.
Okay.
The Professional Governance Act is there to protect you.
Okay.
You have the right to report your concerns to the EGBC without fear of any kind of retaliation.
Okay.
And then they will take it from there. They'll investigate the matter independently.
That's reassuring to know, but I imagine it's still probably a pretty daunting experience for anyone who finds themselves in that position. Are there actual cases of whistleblowing in BC, that kind of highlight how this all works in real life?
Well, while specific cases are often, kept confidential
Right.
to protect the individuals that are involved, there definitely have been instances where engineers and geoscientists have, bravely spoken up about, safety concerns on major projects. And these situations often make headlines.
Right.
And it's a good reminder that, ethical considerations are really paramount,
Yeah.
even when it comes at a personal or professional cost.
It's a powerful reminder that, someone might be, hailed as a hero for designing a magnificent skyscraper, but it's their unwavering commitment to ethical conduct that really makes them a professional, worth admiring.
Well said. And speaking of ethical conduct, it's not always about these really, high-stakes situations with, like, dramatic consequences.
You're right.
The code also dives into the importance of what some might call, like, soft skills.
Okay.
Those everyday practices that really demonstrate integrity and professionalism.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just avoiding these major disasters. What are some examples of these soft skills in action within engineering and geoscience?
Well, something as simple as ensuring fairness and courtesy in all your professional dealings,
Okay.
or giving credit where credit is due on a project.
Right.
Acknowledging the contributions of colleagues and collaborators.
Yeah.
It's about maintaining that high standard of professionalism in every interaction.
It's like that old saying, treat others how you want to be treated.
Right.
It's about respect.
It's exactly.
Recognizing that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and have their work acknowledged.
Exactly. And the code explicitly addresses these seemingly small but crucial aspects of professional conduct.
Okay.
For example, there's a very clear directive to be honest and truthful in all reports, all statements, all communications.
Because even small acts of dishonesty can kind of erode trust over time, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Trust is the bedrock of these professions.
Yeah.
Whether you're designing a bridge, or you're overseeing a mining operation, or you're assessing environmental impact, people need to know that they can rely on your integrity and your judgment.
So it's about more than just like ticking the boxes on a checklist.
Right.
It's about approaching every aspect of your work with this sense of responsibility, honesty, and integrity.
Absolutely. And this commitment to ethical conduct, it ultimately circles back to the heart of both the code and the act.
Yeah.
Protecting the public interest.
Right.
Because when they prioritize ethics,
Yeah.
everyone benefits.
That makes a lot of sense. But are there any specific cases where this emphasis on ethics in the code led to, like tangible changes in how projects are handled in BC?
There have been situations where projects have been delayed, modified, or even, halted entirely due to ethical concerns
Wow.
that were raised by professionals who were bound by the code.
Right.
And these instances demonstrate that the framework's not just theoretical. It has real-world implications.
It's reassuring to know that there are like mechanisms in place to make sure that these ethical considerations are more than just, words on paper.
Yeah,
Like they can actually lead to concrete changes, on the ground, literally in some cases.
absolutely. And those tangible changes,
Yeah.
they really underscore a crucial aspect of both the Code of Ethics and the Professional Governance Act,
Yeah.
and that's accountability.
So it's not just about like setting these ethical guidelines. It's about having like a system in place to actually enforce those guidelines and hold people accountable, hold professionals accountable for their actions.
Exactly. Think of it like this.
Yeah.
We have traffic laws to ensure that everyone's driving safely, on the roads.
Right.
The Code of Ethics and the Act, they serve a similar purpose in the world of engineering and geoscience. They provide a framework for ensuring that professionals are held responsible for their actions, especially when those actions have the potential to impact, public safety or the environment.
That makes perfect sense. It's about ensuring that level of professionalism and ethical conduct that ultimately benefits everyone.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that this framework, while it's robust, it's not static.
Right.
It's constantly evolving, alongside advancements in technology, new understandings of environmental impacts, and evolving societal values as well.
So it's not just a one-time read through and you're good to go. You have to kind of keep learning and adapting as you go.
Exactly. And that's where you, our astute listener, you come in.
Okay.
We've delved into depth of, professional ethics and engineering and geoscience here, but this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, I'm ready for the challenge. What can I do with all this newfound knowledge?
As you encounter, news stories about infrastructure projects or environmental assessments or even just ethical dilemmas that are faced by professionals in these fields,
Right.
just remember the principles that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
Consider how those principles might be at play or perhaps where there's, room for improvement.
So it's about engaging with these topics in a more informed and critical way.
Yes.
Not just kind of taking things at face value, really thinking about them.
Exactly. Ask questions,
Yes.
think critically, and engage in constructive dialogue about the ethical dimensions of engineering and geoscience.
Mm,
Because ultimately, these fields are not just about technical expertise.
right.
They're about shaping the world around us
Yeah.
in a responsible and sustainable way.
Yeah.
And that requires a collective commitment to upholding the highest ethical standards.
This deep dive it's been eye-opening. It's really given me a whole new perspective on just how important ethics are in engineering and geoscience right here in BC. And it's about more than just, these impressive structures and complex calculations. It's about people and trust and the responsibility that comes with, shaping the world that we live in.
Well said. And remember, this conversation doesn't end here.
Mm.
Take these insights, continue exploring, and let's work together to build a future where ethics is always part of the